Welcome back. My apologies for the long hiatus, but I hope to get back to making semi-regular videos, and I come back to weigh in on the Trump border wall nonsense that has been dominating the news as of late while the US government is partially shut down. We've seen rival left-leaning and right-leaning media agencies, often acting as mouthpieces for their respective political party, attacking the idea of the border wall or criticisms against it. I hope to bring a fresh perspective to this by examining the claims put forth by the president and looking at the actual data instead of just feelings and opinions. To understand this whole thing, let's look at Trump's claims in his address to the nation. Now, I will only pick at snippets that actually have factual claims, so if you want to see the full address, check the description for the link.
Tonight, I am speaking to you because there is a growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border. Every day, Customs and Border Patrol agents encounter thousands of illegal immigrants trying to enter our country. We are out of space to hold them, and we have no way to promptly return them back home to their country. America proudly welcomes millions of lawful immigrants who enrich our society and contribute to our nation. But all Americans are hurt by uncontrolled illegal migration. It strains public resources and drives down jobs and wages. Among those hardest hit are African Americans and Hispanic Americans. Our southern border is a pipeline for vast quantities of illegal drugs, including meth, heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl. Every week, 300 of our citizens are killed by heroin alone, 90% of which floods across from our southern border. More Americans will die from drugs this year than were killed in the entire Vietnam War. In the last 2 years, ICE officers made 266,000 arrests of aliens with criminal records, including those charged or convicted of 100,000 assaults, 30,000 sex crimes, and 4,000 violent killings. Over the years, thousands of Americans have been brutally killed by those who illegally entered our country, and thousands more lives will be lost if we don't act right now.
Now, he goes on for a bit talking about the proposed legislation, and I find little to disagree with when he says they'll be adding beds for detainees, detection methods for illegal contraband, or more Border Patrol personnel. However, he has more claims to make.
Finally, as part of an overall approach to border security, law enforcement professionals have requested $5.7 billion for a physical barrier. At the request of Democrats, it will be a steel barrier rather than a concrete wall. This barrier is absolutely critical to border security. It's also what our professionals at the border want and need. This is just common sense. The border wall would very quickly pay for itself. The cost of illegal drugs exceeds $500 billion a year, vastly more than the $5.7 billion we have requested from Congress. The wall will also be paid for indirectly by the great new trade deal we have made with Mexico. Senator Chuck Schumer, who you will be hearing from later tonight, has repeatedly supported a physical barrier in the past, along with many other Democrats. They changed their mind only after I was elected president.
After this point is mostly Trump appealing to people's emotions and trying to smear his political opponents. But let's look at these points individually, and keep in mind, my sources for this can be found in the description, and the vast majority of them will be from official U.S. government sources. First, a growing crisis at the southern border.
Tonight, I am speaking to you because there is a growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border.
This one is easily debunked, mostly because illegal immigration has been going down regularly. Now, it's hard to get up-to-date government statistics for this year. A lot of government agencies publish reports in 2018 that apply to years 2015 and before. It's because the data takes time to put together. For example, this report from the Department of Homeland Security, published in 2018, looks at estimates of illegal immigrant populations in the United States. In it, they estimated that in 2010 there were 11.6 million illegal aliens in the United States. In 2015, that number was 12 million. If you look at this graph, the number of illegal aliens in 2015 is estimated to be approximately the same as 2007. The total population of illegal immigrants generally fluctuates, but holds fairly steady. This paper, published by the Journal on Migration and Human Security, based on reports from the U.S. Census Bureau, shows a steady drop in arrivals from Mexico. The report also shows an increase in arrivals from other areas of the world. The paper points to 9/11 as the cause. As the U.S. became increasingly worried about terrorism, they clamped down on air traffic and border security. Measures such as the existing border fences, more border security agents, and high standards at airports have led to a much lower rate of undocumented population growth. Where it gets even more damning is when you look at the U.S. Border Patrol report, shown here. Now, this report is shown as a spreadsheet listing all the arrests by Border Patrol officers by year, going all the way back to 1960 from 2017. It may be hard to read, so here's a graph made by factcheck.org. In it, we can see the number of arrests at the border have been dropping steadily since 2000 to 2001, the same year 9/11 happened. So there is no border crisis. There never was. Illegal immigration has been almost steadily declining since 2001, and the total number of illegal aliens fluctuates but generally holds steady.
Every day, Customs and Border Patrol agents encounter thousands of illegal immigrants trying to enter our country. We are out of space to hold them, and we have no way to promptly return them back home to their country.
Well, that is also untrue. See, following 9/11, harsher admissions criteria were passed into law concerning asylum seekers, requiring them to be checked more thoroughly than before, resulting in fewer asylum seekers being led into the U.S. However, this chart by the RPC, the Refugee Processing Center, taken on January of this year, is really damning. This information is kept fairly up to date and shows from 1975 to 2018. Notice the very sudden drop from 2016 onward? It's not that the system is overtaxed, it's that the U.S. is letting less people in under Trump's administration. Worse, we see scenes like this, as reported by The Intercept, showing border agents turning away asylum seekers, claiming there's no room.
I'm a reporter, just so you know. Sorry? Can I ask you some questions? They've been out, they have been...
in Mexico, ma'am, so you can speak to a supervisor in a minute.
Okay, they've been trying to... Oh, you're gonna get a supervisor? Okay. I believe they have the right now, because they're in the United States, to ask for asylum. That's what they want to do.
Once again, it's not that we don't, not going to help them. We just like capacity.
Okay.
There's a difference.
But why is there no room? Because Trump slashed funding. Yup, this report here from the National Immigration Forum was compiled from DOS and HHS reports, showing that the Trump administration slashed budgets for departments related to processing refugee and asylum seekers by massive amounts in the 2017 fiscal year, and only put back some of the funding in 2018 and 2019. In essence, he created the backlog by cutting funding, then he gave less than he took away back as time went on, resulting in less funding during his term overall. There is no crisis with an overtaxed system. If it's overtaxed, it's because he made it so. If there is a problem, it's of his own doing. I swear, it's like Trump just shooting himself in the face.
America proudly welcomes millions of lawful immigrants who enrich our society and contribute to our nation. But all Americans are hurt by uncontrolled illegal migration. It strains public resources and drives down jobs and wages. Among those hardest hit are African Americans and Hispanic Americans.
Now this one's a doozy. Firstly, let's look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Using their tool for finding data on unemployment rates, I got this chart that breaks it down by month and year. I averaged the rates in any given year and got this chart, showing a steady decrease in unemployment since 2010, right after the 2008 recession. Well, gee, it seems that under Obama, after the recession, the unemployment rate has steadily fallen and continued to fall under Trump. So the very idea that there is job losses due to illegal immigration is seemingly foolish, since the unemployment rate seems to drop steadily as financial security of the country increases. This is compounded by the fact we know illegal immigrants don't take jobs. They tend to fill jobs Americans won't do. Take, for example, when Stephen Colbert testified in character at a House immigration hearing concerning migrant worker conditions.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Colbert, and I am an American citizen. It is an honor and a privilege to be here today. Congresswoman Lofgren asked me to share my vast experience spending one day as a migrant farm worker. I am happy to use my celebrity to draw attention to this important, complicated issue, and I certainly hope that my star power can bump this hearing all the way up to C-SPAN 1. As we've heard this morning, America's farms are presently far too dependent on immigrant labor to pick our fruits and vegetables. Now, the obvious answer is for all of us to stop eating fruits and vegetables. Now, we all know there is a long tradition of great nations importing foreign workers to do their farm work. After all, it was the ancient Israelites who built the first food pyramids. But this is America. I don't want a tomato picked by a Mexican. I want it picked by an American, then sliced by a Guatemalan, and served by a Venezuelan in a spa where a Chilean gives me a Brazilian.
Now, this was done under the Obama administration. It's a long-standing issue where migrants come north to pick crops because Americans won't. A lot of illegal immigrants aren't taking jobs from Americans. They generally take the jobs Americans won't do. Otherwise, why would a company hire an undocumented illegal alien to be a janitor when they can hire a perfectly legal American? Maybe because they can pay these people less for the same work? Because they know as undocumented workers they can get away with things they can't get away with legal citizens? But as to Trump's claim that illegal immigration hurts black and Hispanic workers the most, it doesn't. And we can go back to the Bureau of Labor Statistics using the same charting tools as before. Looking up unemployment by race, we can show that not only has the unemployment rate steadily declined for these groups, it generally declines faster than white people. I personally think he's only making this claim because he hopes to draw support from typical Democrat voters through scare tactics.
Our southern border is a pipeline for vast quantities of illegal drugs, including meth, heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl. Every week, 300 of our citizens are killed by heroin alone, 90% of which floods across from our southern border. More Americans will die from drugs this year than were killed in the entire Vietnam War.
This part is very true, but not for the reasons you may think. Of course the southern border is where most of the drugs come from. Did you think Canada was importing cocaine? Where would we hide it, in bottles of maple syrup? Oh no, hockey pucks might be packs of cocaine spray-painted black. Yes, typically illegal drugs come from south of the United States. As for more deaths than the Vietnam War, that's not hard. Not that many people died in the Vietnam War relatively compared to the current population of the United States. In the duration of the war, as stated here by the U.S. government, 58,200 people died. That sounds like a lot, but keep in mind the 8th leading cause of death in the United States in 2016 causes 51,537 deaths per year. Can you guess what that is? Influenza and pneumonia. The flu almost kills more people than the Vietnam War, and this is according to the CDC. The flu almost kills more people each year than the Vietnam War. Accidents, unintentional injuries like car accidents, falling from a ladder and breaking your neck and such, account for 161,374 deaths per year, almost 3 times as many deaths as the Vietnam War. The opioid crisis is a big deal because of the sudden spike in overdoses from fentanyl. It's not from a sudden spike in drugs being smuggled across the border, it's because a different kind is suddenly popular, and this one is more dangerous.
in the last 2 years, ICE officers made 266,000 arrests of aliens with criminal records, including those charged or convicted of 100,000 assaults, 30,000 sex crimes, and 4,000 violent killings.
This bit is a bunch of stage theater, throwing out big-sounding numbers and hoping they will impress the listener.
I'm very highly educated. I know words. I have the best words.
Sort of like the last one using the idea of a major war as a barometer. According to this report by the Congressional Research Service, published in June 2018, violent crime in the U.S. is at an all-time low. In fact, according to this chart, violent crime has been fairly steadily dropping since 1991. But if illegal immigration is causing violent crimes, you'd expect violent crime rates to fluctuate based on immigration. And it doesn't. Here's a study by the Center for Immigration Studies, a proponent for limited immigration, which starts like this. This study examines academic and government research on the question of immigrant crime. New government data indicate that immigrants have a high rate of criminality, while older academic research found low rates. The overall picture of immigrants and crime remains confused due to a lack of good data and contrary information. However, the newer government data indicate that there are legitimate public safety reasons for local law enforcement to work with federal immigration authorities. The study, however, concludes with the following. In conclusion, we find that it would be a mistake to assume that immigrants as a group are more prone to crime than other groups, or that they should be viewed with more suspicion than others. Even though immigrant incarceration rates are high in some populations, there is no clear evidence that immigrants commit crimes at higher or lower rates than others. Nevertheless, it also would be a mistake to conclude that immigrant crime is insignificant, or that offenders' immigration status is irrelevant to local policing. The newer information available as a result of better screening of the incarcerated population suggests that, in many parts of the country, immigrants are responsible for a significant share of crime. This indicates that there are legitimate safety reasons for local law enforcement agencies to determine the immigration status of offenders and to work with federal immigration authorities. The study itself is a good read, pointing out that earlier statistics claiming lower criminality rates of immigrants to be based on poor data collection, but newer higher estimates are also fraught with problems. As well, one of the crimes these immigrants are often incarcerated for is immigration crimes, so the criminality of illegal immigrants is sort of thrown off by the very crime they are guilty of for being there. So when Trump says illegal immigrants commit more crimes, he's sort of talking out of his ass. He's not necessarily lying, unlike most of his other statements. He may just be misinformed. As for the ICE arrests, this is misleading too, as arrests are down 31.8% since 2013, and deportations are down 30.5%. You see, if you go to their website, they claim in 2018 they arrested 158,581 and removed 256,086 people, which was up from 2017. But for example, in 2013, they arrested 232,287 and removed 368,364 people, according to the same website. You can find this at the bottom of the page, where they give a link to their previous fiscal years. It's just harder to read because it's a scanned image of a page, and it's sideways. Way to phone it in, ICE! But now we can get into why he went off, flat out lying to the American people about a border crisis. The border wall.
Finally, as part of an overall approach to border security, law enforcement professionals have requested $5.7 billion for a physical barrier.
Donald. Can I call you Donald? The southern border has physical barriers. I mean, come on, Donald. Did you even check Wikipedia? What's being proposed is seemingly replacing the existing double-layer border fence with a much taller concrete wall.
What are the walls going to be made out of?
That might be the best question I get today. I'll tell you what it's going to be made of. It's going to be made of hardened concrete, and it's going to be made out of rebar and steel. At the request of Democrats, it will be a steel barrier rather than a concrete wall.
Oh, wait, sorry. It's been downgraded to steel slats. Gee, that sounds like the existing wall at the San Diego border, just, well, taller. Yes, this whole thing now is a spat over the border fence, and whether Trump can blow $5.7 billion to replace the existing border fence with a taller one. Which begs the question, if they have a fence now, why do they need a taller one? We have no clue, but it sure feels good keeping the dirty Mexicans out, eh, Donald?
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. The border wall would very quickly pay for itself. The cost of illegal drugs exceeds $500 billion a year, vastly more than the $5.7 billion we have requested from Congress.
This claim is also bogus. Here's an article on CNN's website where leaders of a Mexican drug cartel state how they smuggle drugs into the U.S., mostly through legal ports of entry by hiding it in vehicles or using tunnels under the fence. But a key thing to note, CNN doesn't explicitly state, but is implied by the article. The cartel leader pretty much tells you that they changed tactics because the current fence made things harder, so they went for the weak points, the ports of entry. He said that in the late 1980s to early 1990s, 95% of cocaine was brought into the United States by a tunnel under Arizona's border with Mexico. But as law enforcement began discovering and closing tunnels, cartel management directed drugs to flow into the United States in other ways. What's not explicitly stated, possibly because it goes against the narrative of the article pushing back against Trump, is that the border fence constructions and increased activity of Border Patrol led to the tunnels being discovered. Following 9/11, a huge push to secure the southern border led to President Bush enacting border fencing along the southwestern border, and the fence continuing to be expanded under President Obama. This increased focus and the physical barriers caused them to move to ports of entry. Were getting past the fence easier than going through these ports of entry? They do it. This is basically an admission that the current fencing works. Donald, Democrats don't vote against the wall because they disagree physical barriers work. They voted against it because you want to tear up the existing ones to build bigger ones. And this cartel leader kind of admitted the current fence works. They voted against it because it's a giant waste of money. The wall won't pay for itself by reducing the drug trade. Making a higher fence won't change things. This won't reduce the drug trade because it's not adding anything really new. And what little drugs that get tossed over the fence with catapults is minuscule. The only reason for wanting a higher fence is to keep people from climbing over it. Cargo is hard to get over or under a fence. A person can climb. The only reason Trump is pushing this wall is to keep immigrants out. The other reasons he puts forth, like the idea it has anything to do with curbing the drug trade, is just to make it more palatable to the American people.
The wall will also be paid for indirectly by the great new trade deal we have made with Mexico.
And here Trump shows he doesn't understand how international trade works. I mean, the man thought a trade deficit meant the U.S. was losing money to Mexico.
Speaking of stupid and madmen, Donald Trump.
Donald, trade is done by the people, not the government. The trade deal didn't include tariffs, which is taxes put on imports and exports. Instead, it played with how much market share each country had. So the government isn't getting any extra money, but corporations and businesses in those countries. And they aren't giving it to the government. The only way you could possibly claim that the U.S. government could collect money for the border wall is by increased tax collection as unemployment lowers and businesses prosper. But as explained earlier, unemployment rates pretty much always lowered in the last decade. So the new trade deal isn't paying for the wall in any real sense of the claim.
Senator Chuck Schumer, who you will be hearing from later tonight, has repeatedly supported a physical barrier in the past, along with many other Democrats. They changed their mind only after I was elected president.
Yep, they did. They supported physical barriers. It's even been reported both Obama and Hillary voted for them. What they aren't supporting is your vanity project that is demonstrably going to do next to nothing at great expense to the taxpayer. So, in a nutshell, Trump lied through his teeth, demonstrably so, and there is no border crisis. All he wants to do is build a wall. I wonder if he'll gold-plate it and put his name on it. Anyways, that's it for me. If you enjoyed this video, remember to mash that like, share, and subscribe button. If you enjoy this content or have requests for future videos, remember to leave me a comment or send me a message. And as always, I will see you next time.